So welcome everybody. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Amy Patterson and I'm the Executive Director of the Connecticut Land Conservation Council. But tonight we're doing something a little bit different. We are focusing our conversation on how land conservation may be used to address social and environmental needs. And we've brought in some guest speakers and we're really excited to introduce them tonight. All three of them represent, well, there's three organizations, four speakers represent really cutting edge organizations doing some amazing creative work in their service areas.
I would say that I think it starts with first trying to make sure that what your organization does, what we do, we try to do it to the best of our ability and do it really well. Because otherwise you're not going to be a strong collaborator or a partner. You're gonna slow others down, right? And create a lot of inefficiencies. So one is just making sure that your pencils are sharpened. I think the other part of it is ensuring that it is an equitable collaboration, and that requires you to be a bit more reserved, slow to speak, quick to listen, and make sure that there's space for a diversity of perspectives. And so because we have a pretty broad geographical footprint across the city of New Haven, there are a lot of stakeholder groups that we have to engage with. And so we do have a formal board of directors, but pretty much everyone is my boss in the city of New Haven. And so you have to be willing to engage and allow others to take the lead and sort of see yourself, how we see ourselves largely is an instrument that's trying to facilitate connections with nature. And so for us, I would say that we have many relationships within the city of New Haven with a number of different community-based organizations. Oftentimes, and regrettably, I would add that collaborations typically are driven by funding. And so we're trying to get to a point where we're not necessarily, moving on that reflex where, we're sort of thinking about how we can operate together, even when resources aren't pronounced. Because in and of itself, we are the resource. And so just taking on a different perspective in terms of how we approach working with different organizations within the community.
Our most successful thing in some ways has been our first house, which has turned out to be better than we thought. On the other hand, it had a lot more challenges than we thought, right? We weren't kind of like up and running yet. One of the things about doing housing is that everybody thinks they can kind of, they watch a few HGTV shows and they're like, oh, a house, I can fix it up, So I think the kitchen was painted several times before we really got to the house, like, no. But I think that both because the people selling it to us kind of gave us a break and we were able to raise money in the community, but also it also has to do with a lot to do with who became the first homeowner and kind of so a young Black man in the community who really is invested in, he went to school outside the community, came back and was like, I want to live here. I want to be part of this community. I really believe in nonprofits. I really like this model. I want to know more about it and I want to promote it. And I think, you don't always get, sometimes I've done some community land trust work before and people are so exhausted by being in rental situations that are exhausting and the like that they get in the house and it's like, okay, I'm done. Thank you. I've got it. Right. And so instead having somebody who went through homeownership training, went through landlord training, has a commitment to the couple who live downstairs, has a commitment to being not just the first and only homeownership in the block, but to be a model to get other folks kind of, interested in that or get the land trust interested in other houses on that block. So I think part of it, and he's down on the board as a leasing representative doing workshops with the rest of us because he's the person who's asked the most, what is this, right? And so he has developed a way of, he's in education anyway, but so that has helped him. So he's developed a way to being able to kind of talk about it and understanding when you're talking about, if you're talking to funders or somebody who might be interested. So he's doing a workshop with the rest of the CLT. So I think that kind of when people who are really involved, who are most affected by kind of the negative aspects of, you know, these things, are able to really step forward and say permanently affordable housing for this model is great. Here's how to do it. I can help you do it. Let's kind of get involved together.
Right, like they become your biggest advocates, right? Like they can go off and preach it for you without you having to say anything.
That's right. And that, you know, he was, he was highlighted in the day, in the day newspaper was doing a whole thing on affordable housing. And, you know, he, you know, so we asked him at the annual meeting to talk a little about it. And he said, well, I just did a 2-hour interview with the day. Sure. You know,
Right.
So I think that particularly as a young Black man in this community, has just provided kind of, and you know, that's the perfect role model, but you don't know that's who you're going to get when you open it up to, you know, the 30 people must have come by and kind of wanted to see the house, came to the open house, whatever. So
one of our most positive successes of recent was during COVID. We were able to build a farm stand on the property that sits right on Route 44. And not only is it a beautiful farm stand, but the best thing is that it provides vocational opportunities for neurodiverse adults and a stepping stone to jobs in the community. And we've had a couple of those success stories. One young man, his name is Mitchell, high functioning adult with autism, very articulate, came to the farm stand to volunteer and learn skills because he had such great anxiety. And 6 months later, he applied for a job at Lowe's. And he's now a full-fledged employee at Lowe's. And he credits so much of it to what happened with his skill training at Creative Living. And that to us just makes it all worthwhile.
Awesome. That does. I mean, I see your farm stand. I'm really inspired by it. That's awesome.